Our interview today is with Betty Plyler. We are at her home. Today is April the 6th, 2007. And Ms. Plyler, we thank you for allowing us to come to your home and interview you for the Mooresville Museum. We know that you grew up in Mooresville and you lived on Oak Street. So tell us a little bit about your recollections of growing up on Oak Street and going to Parkview School.
Oh, I remember little, but enough to have fond memories. I was 2 blocks from Parkview, and it took me 7 minutes to get there. Mother always timed me when I got home, and I had teachers that my mother had. I'm not sure about Miss Stafford, but whether she had her or not, but I had Miss Stafford, and she was my pet, and I was one of hers. She petted me and Marshall Cheryl. And I like going there simply because I was the only girl in a group of boys on Oak Street. There was Teeny Overcash, Bill Murdoch, which was a star football player, Bubba Miller, which was tough. He was tough. And Jimmy Nance. Well, that's more than I thought I remembered. But Richard Justice, Red Campbell. So I was the only girl in this bunch, so I sort of got my way. And
were you a tomboy? Did you play?
Oh, yes. Except the time Bubba Miller got mad at me and threw me in the ditch, and I came home with my dress torn and all muddy, and Mother thought I had been hit by a car. But I love Parkview. I hated leaving there. But then when I left Parkview, I took all my best friends with me. There was Sarah Davis, Tootsie, we called her, and took her with me to high school. So I wasn't lonely then. And Vera McConnell, Helen Combs.
Mary Lou McKee?
Yes, Mary Elizabeth.
Now, when you were at Parkview, there was no cafeteria, right? So you came home
came home for lunch.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was only 2 blocks away.
Mm-hmm.
I skipped down 1 block, ran the 2nd block, and then I walked back to the 1st block, which was Statesville Avenue, and then I skipped the rest of the way to school. I always wore out my shoes, 2 weeks old, and they were always worn out. And it bothered Daddy no end because shoes were expensive and work was little.
And your father worked for the railroad.
He worked for the Southern Railroad, and he worked, I don't remember how many years, but 50-odd years. My grandmother and grandfather, on his side, lived in Mount Morn, and Dad would take me. I remember I wasn't in school, and I threatened to run away. And Dad said it was okay, but I'd have to be careful. So he packed me a little bag and a lunch, and he said, was it all right if he walked down to the railroad with me? And I said yes. When we got down there, I was going to leave, and he said, the train's coming. He said, let's wait till the train goes by. Well, the train slowed down, and Dad grabbed me and jumped into the engine part of the train. And we went all the way to Mount Morn, to my grandmother's and grandfather's, and we had lunch. And when we came back, the train slowed down, and he got on the caboose, and he had me on his hip. So that was my runaway. So never wanted to run again. But he took me several times on a trip like that. And Dad used to like not that I don't think he liked the fires, but he should have been a fireman. The Cook barn burned.
Where was the Cook barn?
At Cascade. I'll say it was at Cascade, but it was at the edge of the woods. It wasn't in Cascade proper. It was at the edge of the woods. And horses burned. And he took me with him, and when we heard the horses, he got back in the car and brought me home. But I can remember standing in his back pockets. He wore overalls, and I stood in his back pocket. So I had to be small to watch fires. The Baptist church burned down there at the graveyard, and we watched that burn. I remember that one. Don't remember anymore.
So was he a volunteer fireman, or did he just...
No, he just went. At that time, the fire department would blow so many toots, 1, 2, or 3, and it told you where the fire was, if you knew where the sections were. And evidently he knew the sections because he would jump in the car and ask me if I wanted to go, and we'd go and we'd watch the fire. So.
Well, you said the Cook barn.
Yes.
Was this did it belong to the Cooks? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Patty Cook. Have you heard of Patty Cook? She was I believe, a basketball player in our class. Patty was very athletic, pretty girl.
You mentioned the basketball team. Who was do you remember who the coach of the girls' basketball team?
Richards.
Miss Richards?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I was cheerleader at the time. With who? Marshall Sherrill. Marshall was a good-looking kid. I don't know what happened to him later, but he was such a good-looking kid. And Sarah Davis, Tootsie. I don't know, we just...
Okay, now your class graduated in 1945, and that was during the war. How did the war affect your high school class during those years?
I'm not so sure whether other people felt this way or not. We lost a lot of boys. When I say lost them, they went into service. I don't know.
Without finishing high school directly?
Yes. My husband left high school and went in. They were just young kids. Think about it. I don't know how it affected us other than that. They were gone. Mm-hmm. And you said they were in the Navy, they were in the Army, or they were overseas. It's sort of like now, war is going on, but does it affect us? I mean, you know, it doesn't come into my house.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not living with it, but I'm affected by it.
Mm-hmm. But it came into your school, certainly.
Yes, it did.
Mm-hmm. What about the rationing? How did that affect your life?
Well, I wasn't rationed. We lived on the farm.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had mother canned and had gardens, and we had plenty. Mm-hmm. We were poor and didn't know it. You had just so many clothes and a nail on the closet wall. You really didn't have a lot of closets. We didn't.
Now, when did you move to the farm, Betty?
When I went into the 7th grade. And I can't remember how old I was.
Was there a particular reason why you moved from Oak Street to the farm?
Dad built us a house down there in a little village called Sherrilltown. And at that time, my grandfather had moved there. I remember Dad bought the lot, and I remember hearing them talk. It was either 3 or 5 acres. I can't remember what. Can't remember which. But they paid $500 for it and the 4-room house, and the house was new. That was a pretty good buy.
Mm-hmm.
So
your father left the railroad at that time?
No. He stayed on the
railroad, but you had the farm as well.
Well, we didn't actually farm.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather had the farm, and we just lived close to him on an edge of it. And Mother canned, and she had a big garden. And Daddy worked away from home a lot, and came back on weekends. He'd come home on Fridays and go back on Monday mornings real early.
So he actually was on the trains?
No.
Oh.
Dad worked the tracks.
Uh-huh.
He helped invent one of these tracks that laid the ties without the men having to do it manually.
A machine that
A
made
machine.
time.
But he didn't benefit by it because, you know, when you invent anything where you're working for a company, it goes to the company.
So you say he worked the tracks. What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, did you ever see, no, you're not old enough. Did you, I'll address this to you. Did you ever see men on the track in a little car?
Oh,
and they
excuse
push
me, I did see that too.
Well, he had a car, you know, one of the push ones. And he would, I hope I'm telling this right for Dad, he would check the tracks, see if anything was okay, anything missing. He had to lay new track, new ties, and all the time. I can remember Daddy coming home in the winter time, and this sounds so gross. He would be so cold that his fingers would stay blue, and then they'd turn white, and then they'd get pink, you know. Then I can remember him in the summertime coming home and sitting on the back steps and having his hands full of salt and rubbing his legs until they bled. He had poison oak, and they had no way of getting rid of it. And he would get all this, you know, working on the railroad. And I think they made so little.
And he worked, you said did he work mostly in North Carolina or all over the South?
Well, he worked up and down the South some. I don't think he went north. I know he worked South Carolina a lot. And he had a team with him. They had a camp car where they slept, and they had a camp car where they cooked and ate. And actually, I don't know too much about that. He didn't talk about it a lot. But then when he quit the railroad, he had hurt his back and had to quit. But he went to work with at the Army Navy store. Who was it that owned the Army Navy store? Who was that?
Nat Smith?
Nat Smith. He and Nat Smith worked for years together. And I think until Nat, I'm not sure. I think he worked there as long as Nat was there. Yeah.
Okay, so you were married and your husband was in the Navy, and you traveled a lot of different places. What are some of your fond memories of living all around the world?
Well, I didn't like living out of a suitcase. That takes the cake, I guess. I remember one time I went to Washington, state of Washington, and Michael was small, and my dad, he never wanted us to go anywhere, and in between stopovers, we always stayed with Dad and Mom. So Mike and I, Dad took us to the airport, and he kept saying, if it has 2 engines, I'm not going to worry. If it has 2 engines, I'm not going to worry. And while we were riding down there, no, that was going to Guam. Michael said, I'll tell you that part of it. Michael said he was standing behind Dad with his arms around Dad's neck. And Dad said, son, what's your problem? You've got a problem? And Michael said, my heart is broken. And Daddy stopped the car and says, mine is too, and it's your mama's fault. So I'm not going to lie to you, it's her fault, it's not mine. But we went on the plane, and that was going to Guam. He was bigger then. I'll have to go back when he was younger, going to Washington. He didn't talk then because he was so young. He must have been 2, maybe 2. He talked enough, but not much. But we got on the plane, and I tried to pass him off as a baby or kid, and I had dressed him a little baby-fied, and of course everybody knew it. And so when we got to Chicago, going up there, we were on a plane that stopped at every cow pasture. We had a girl that had an evening dress on. She was going to a party. And we had a couple that was going to see their grandparents. And we had a St. Bernard. from there. They got loose from the, and all this was going on. And it ended up in Chicago, and I was the only one on the plane in Chicago. So there were 2 pilots, and one was the, what do you call it? He came and checked and saw if everything was like a stewardess. He did that, plus he was the assistant pilot. And so he came back and got Michael, and he said, "Honey, let me carry the baby," and put it on the other plane. So he did. He carried Michael to the other plane so I could get him over there. You did a lot of things. And we got to Seattle, and Jay wasn't there. So we sat. But he got when I sent the telegram that I'm coming, I put the wrong date on it. So he was right and I was wrong, and mine was in black and white. So, and when we came back from Seattle, we played the big wheels. And, the Navy gave us tickets to come back with. And, of course, they give you the lower price tickets. Well, we added some to it. We had saved some, and we added some to it. And we took, it's nice to want to be somebody, but then you can't remember what you wanted to be. We had a private car that had...
a limousine.
No, not a private car.
You were
on
a train?
Yes.
Oh,
we weren't not in a private.
A roomette or something?
Yes, we had a roomette, and it had seats during the day, and he would come in at night and make down beds, and a bathroom. And this was really great for carrying a small kid. And of course, we were 6 or 8 hours out, and he threw up. And that was extra sharp. Nobody else could go in the roomette, but we went and had to sleep there. But they came and cleaned it up and everything, and I know we were sitting out. It was a glass dome car, and we were looking at the mountains and everything out in Washington. Beautiful. The greens are so green out there, and the blues are blue you've never seen before. And a bell kept ringing. And there was space between the bells when they would ring. And the guy that worked there, I suppose he was a waiter or something, because it was, you could get drinks in the car. And the bell would go off, and he'd come out and he'd look around at all the passengers and everything, and then he'd go back. And then the bell would go off again. Well, nobody knew what it was or who was doing it or what. And I looked, and Michael was doing it. And he, under the handles of the chair that he was sitting in, there was a button under there. And when the waiter would go back, he would push the button and go, ha, 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 ha. So, very gently, I moved his hand and nearly broke his arm. We never did tell anybody it was Michael, but he quit pushing the button. So those are some memories. We went to Newport, Rhode Island then. Jay went up there. And he was the only enlisted man living on the island, because the rest of them were officers in the class, but he was teaching then.
And how long did you live in Guam? You said you were overseas in Guam?
2 years, a little over 2 years. I don't know exactly. We were out there early enough that the ladies didn't wear anything on top. And you'd go from one end of the island to the other. It wouldn't take you half an hour. I think it was about 27 miles long. And, of course, Dad didn't want us to go there. He said it was on a stem and it was going to fall off. But we stayed there about 2 years. That's when I got pregnant with we call her Skis, Sanda. But it was nice. It never got below 70. Never got over 80-some. So the weather stayed the same all the time. we had a couple of bad storms, which I didn't like, and an earthquake. Jay and I had gone to an outdoor movie, and we sat on the benches on rocks, and it would go shiver, shiver, shiver. You know how rocks sound when they shiver, shiver, shiver. And I was mad at Jay, and we weren't speaking to each other. Michael was sitting in between us. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting on Jay's lap, and Michael's sitting on my lap, and the rocks are going shh, shh, shh. And I don't think we ever found out what we were mad about. So, but we went out by ship and came back by ship. Michael was sick going out. We carried paper bags with us everywhere. But I was sick coming back. Of course, I had the baby, and she was only a couple of weeks old. We had to get the medical officer's son to let us bring her home that early. But it was a rough trip.
How long did it take?
I don't remember now, but it was quite a few days from Guam, and then we stopped in Honolulu, and then on to San Francisco, and then we bought a car in San Francisco. Well, Jay bought the car, and I went down to Southern California to my cousin's. While he was doing that, and he came down and picked me up, and we went across the mountain. She was in India. I'm not sure whether it was no, it wasn't Indio. It was Borrego, because I mistakenly asked everybody trying to find a way there. I called it Borrego, and they told me you don't pronounce it that way. It's Borrego. Just like don't go and if his name is Jesus, don't call him Jesus. You know. But you can take the country out of the girl, but you can't. You take the girl out of the country, but you can't get the country out of the girl. So.
And then you moved back to Mooresville in 1964. Is that right?
Yes, Jan was 4 years old.
And so tell us what Mooresville was like in the mid-'60s.
We came back, and we couldn't find a place to live. Of course, the children and I came down, and we always picnicked at Mother's, poor Mother and Dad, but trying to find a place. We couldn't find anybody that was building anything. We finally got this place, Mr. Hager, down, I think it was Faith Road, I'm not sure. And he was in service, so the wife let us have the house while our house was being built, and Carl Knox built our house. And
where was that house then?
Off Shears Chapel Road. It was on the farm that we had. Mm-hmm. And it was what we wanted, what we'd saved for. And it's sad now. It's torn down now.
You know, today we call Shears Chapel, what we used to know as Shears Chapel Road, it's called now known as Shears Road. Was there actually a Shears Chapel down that road? Was there a church known as Shears Chapel?
You know, I don't know. Shears Chapel Church. I don't know. I was thinking, the Presbyterian is down at the end of the road. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
I've always wondered why that road was now it's called Shears Road. It's been changed.
I didn't know that either.
Mm-hmm.
When you came back to Mooresville, were there a lot of your contemporaries, your classmates who were coming back from the service and so forth at about the same time?
Well, Rena Lou, I think, I'm not sure. Rena Lou Howell came back around that time. Myself. I don't remember any others. I'm sure there was, but I don't remember them.
You have a number of your classmates who are here now.
Oh yes. Vera's here, Betty Jo, Mary Elizabeth. Nellie Blair was in
Nellie Bear Price.
Mhm. But she passed away. I don't know when that was. We've had a number of deaths, too. I think Betty Freeze was one of our first ones. I don't remember her well. Not after we so-called grew up.
Mhm.
I don't know that all of us have grown up. I mean, we look at the mirror and say, who's that old lady? But that doesn't mean we've grown up.
That's a wonderful attitude.
Well, age didn't bother me until this past year. I saw the wrinkles, but I thought, I deserve them. They're mine. But then a year ago, I looked in the mirror and I thought, oh, this has got to go. This has got to change. And it hasn't. It's just gotten worse. So, but you accept it and go on.
Betty, when you moved from Parkview School to the high school, and the people from South School came into your lives, did you find it interesting? Were they different in any way from the people you had grown up with on the north side of town?
No, we thought we were as good as they were.
Oh, as good as?
Yes.
Oh, you thought that they thought they were better than you?
Oh, now don't put words in my mouth.
Well, you know,
There were some cute ones from South, but Jerry Crouch was one of them. But at one time, Jerry went to Parkview with me. She lived beside me on Oak Street for a short time. So there were some pretty ones. There were some cute kids at the school when I was growing up. Tootsie, there's Tootsie. You see her? Right above the teddy bear.
let me see if I can get her in the picture.
This one right here.
Oh, yeah.
That's Tootsie. Isn't she great?
She is cute.
That was me in high school. This is my son and his daughter, his youngest daughter, Diana. And this is my baby daughter, my oldest daughter. And my son cut that out of a magazine. It was advertising some kind of alcohol. But he said, Mom, I told all the guys on the ship that my mother looked like this. So I've kept that thing for years. I'm so afraid it'll fall apart. And this is me in school. Thomas Templeton had it.
Which one was that? I missed.
This one right here. I've got it held together because it was falling apart.
Oh, okay.
And he brought it to me. He said he thought I might want it. So,
You have a nice collection of memorabilia there on your refrigerator.
oh, I have to keep it there so I'll remember. Oh, and this is my oldest daughter and myself during the centennial. Remember that?
Oh, yes.
This is her husband. This is my youngest daughter. This Tootsie and Mag. And these are one of Tootsie's cards. We're always sending little girl cards. I guess she was about, you know, it takes a while, or maybe you have to be a certain age before you realize what a friend is. But Tootsie was a first friend, so I guess she'll always be there.
Is she living in Mooresville now?
No, she deserted me. No, she didn't do it, Mac did. Mac thought I would take up too much of her time, so he moved to Wilkesboro.
Oh my goodness.
And he's up there around North Wilkesboro somewhere.
Well, is there anything else that you want to tell us about living in Mooresville or growing up in Mooresville?
Mooresville is not Mooresville anymore. 150 is a madhouse, and when I grew up, it was in the country.
And it was called River Road. Or,
Yes, yes. And when you went to River Road, you had an outing. You went to the bridge, and you either fished, or you stood on the side of the bridge and watched the cars go by, or people down swimming. You don't see that anymore. I miss Mooresville. It's nice to have the doctor here and the drugstore here and the shopping here, but I miss Mooresville. I miss Main Street. And it's sad, Mooresville is getting pretty again as a main street. It's, I think when they finish with it, it's going to be a nice little town. But I miss the way it was. We had a couple of buildings on Main Street. You remember where the school was? The school building.
Which
The
school?
offices.
Oh, the school offices, yes. On Main Street.
We own that building. And then we own the one where the bank was on the corner. And when we moved back here, what was the superintendent's name?
Dr. Morgan? Was it before Dr. Morgan?
Who was before him?
I don't remember.
I don't know now. I can't think now. But he found out. No, he asked Michael where he lived, and Michael told him Mr. Haker's place down on Faith Road. And he sent a notice that Michael couldn't go to school in Mooresville. He would have to go to Troutman. So Jay went to see him. When Jay came down one weekend, he went to see him and asked him why. And it was Dr. Morgan. And he was giving his reasons why Michael couldn't go to school there. And Jay says, well, if that's the case, then I'm afraid we'll have to close our building and you can't be in there anymore. And he said, what building? He said, the school office buildings. And Dr. Morgan said, why would you say that? And Jay said, because I own the building. I've paid taxes on it for years. And if my son can't go to school in Mooresville, what's the use of having a building for the school? I'll make it easier for you when you don't make it easier for me. Jay was that way. But it was nice. Michael went to Mooresville. So, what was your question? I forgot it.
I was just asking you if you had some other things you wanted to talk about Mooresville, and you were talking about, how Mooresville's changing and things like that.
Well, I used to say to people, what made you move to Mooresville? And now I know why they moved to Mooresville, all the race car drivers and all this and that and the other. But I like the tiny town. I liked it when we moved, and we moved into a tiny town or a section that appeared to be a small part of a town or a small town. But the traffic's beginning to get me. I hate 77. It's just like Charlotte. Is it 77? Yeah.
But when you grew up as a child, did you go to Charlotte shop?
Oh, yes. Yes. In fact, a couple of us skipped school, grabbed a bus, and went to Charlotte. And we had little money. We had saved up to go, and we didn't have anything to have lunch with, We just walked the streets and looked in the shops and everything. And we got our bus back home in time for me to catch the city bus home, and others to catch their school bus home. And when I walked in the front door, my mother had no phone, and she had no friends that drove a car. And she said to me, what were you doing in Charlotte today? And I never found out how she learned. But she said a little bird told her so. But that bird, I could have killed it. That bird told on me a lot. Oh, it was a yakking bird. I remember Arby was one. She and I went, and Betty Jean Sherrill. Yeah, we went.
It sounds like you had a fun life when living here in Mooresville during that time.
I did. I think everybody had fun at the high school. We loved the teachers. The teachers were great.
Tell us about Miss Mary McNeely.
Oh, I love Miss Mary. She taught me history. I couldn't tell if she was looking at me or if she was looking at Betty Jo, But Betty Jo was smart, so had no reason to look at Betty Jo. But I loved her. I really did. Now, Miss Shove, I was scared to death of. Didn't think I would be, but I was. I didn't talk in her class at all. And Thomas Templeton, he may be a doctor, but he was a yacker when he was little. When he was young, we just tormented Miss Harrell. Poor Miss Harrell, we tormented her to death.
What did she teach, Betty?
English in our homeroom. And Thomas and I, he brought some candy one day to school, some peanut brittle. And he and I sat in the back seat and ate candy. And she told him very kindly that if he couldn't have enough candy for the whole class, that we couldn't eat it. So of course Thomas, his dad was a doctor, so he had money. We didn't have any, but he went out and we bought some more peanut brittle, and we had a class, English class, right after lunch. So everybody had peanut brittle. You know, we had a little piece of it anyway. And she let us eat it. And then another day, Thomas and I were sitting on the window ledge, and you know, in the high school, the window ledges were high on the 3rd floor. And we were up on the window ledges above the heat registers. And Thomas had a leg out and a leg in. I don't remember whether I did or not. But we threatened to jump if she didn't read to us. The woman guy, she was practically in tears. And she kept saying, I'll read. And we told her she couldn't change her mind, start reading before we got down, and she did. But we were talking about that not too many years ago, and she was talking to Thomas about it, I think, if I remember right. I hope I do. And I was standing behind her, and I said something, and she said, and I know that voice too. And she had remembered us. Poor thing.
Speaking of going out, that Thomas went out and bought the peanut brittle. Now, when you were in high school, did you have a cafeteria there, or did you go somewhere for
No,
lunch?
we had a cafeteria part-time. I can't remember whether we had one in the 7th grade or not, because I remember going to my grandmother's on Oak Street and having lunch. Now, that was a quick trip. You ran there, had lunch, and ran back. You didn't gain weight going to school because you had a lot of walking to do. I can remember walking from, you know, they tell tales about I walked 9 miles to school in the snow. Well, I didn't do that, but I rode a bike from where I lived out in the country, sometimes to school, if I missed the bus or if I missed the principal. And
Who was the principal when you were in high school?
the path.
Mr. Miller?
Poole.
No, Mr. Miller.
No, that was it.
He was
Mr. Poole? Was it?
Poole?
Mr. Poole.
Yeah.
Mr. Miller was the superintendent, wasn't he?
Yes, he was the superintendent before Dr. Morgan, I believe. I don't know. I know he was superintendent at one point.
Well, I hope I said that right when I said Dr. Morgan.
Well,
It doesn't matter.
it doesn't matter. No.
I didn't mean to slander him.
Uh.
But,
So Mr. Poole was principal.
he was the principal because he started the band.
That's right.
And Betty Jean and Doris were majorettes. And I played the boom, 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 the tuba. And got it hung in the door, and I decided I didn't want to play anymore. The door of the school bus. I was half in, half out with this horn and couldn't get it either way. So I didn't stay long in the band.
So the band was begun while you were in high school?
Yes, yes. We didn't have things like that before Mr. Poole came. And he was a nice man.
Then was Mr. Scott the next one, Jack Scott? He came after you had graduated.
I don't remember him, so he must have. Miss Scott.
Irma Scott was
Irma,
the music teacher.
Yes, yes. She had our choir, our chorus. I loved her too. She was, well, I loved to torment her. Well, I think most of us did, you know. She'd turn her back and we'd whisper. I know one, no, this was a new one after Miss Scott left. she was leading the chorus in something down under the base, in the basement of the new gym. And I slipped out behind her, right out the door. Me and another girl. I don't remember who it was. And we went out and did like idiotic kids. So we went out and painted our names, of all things. And you know, you could paint somebody else's name, but we did our names on the sidewalk. We went right back in and sat down. And there it is, you know. So the principal saw our names. So the next day he gave us both a brick. And we walked out, and she saw us walking out with the brick, and we had to sit out there and scrape that paint off. He let it dry completely. So, and we were doing things like that. They weren't malicious things, but they were wrong things.
Well, this has certainly been a wonderful interview, Betty. We appreciate it. We appreciate your stories, particularly of your school days.
I hope I didn't get too many things wrong.
You did not. You did not. And we so appreciate you letting us come and chat with you today.
Well, good. Let's go have lunch now.
Okay, sounds like a great idea.